do this. Connie, the next time they ask you, decline. I bring an economist in and you pull Rotary trivia. And why don't you bring a CPA exam in next? Have Dittmeyer help us with that. Jesus. Anyway, our economist that honestly does not act like an economist has the personality of a Christy Morrison, who happens to be very good friends together, but she never told me about how to get in contact with him to get him here. He doesn't have a very good memory because he was here February 26th of 2015, and he agreed to come back. Yeah. So
it took that long.
It took that long, email after email, and you finally, the barrage, you let it go. Anyway, he's an economist and president of RegionTrack. It's an Oklahoma City-based economic research firm. He specializes in regional economic forecasting and analysis. Prior to that, he was with the VP of the Federal Reserve out of Kansas City, and his territory was Colorado, Wyoming, and northern New Mexico. Atlanta, Georgia native, UGA undergrad, Georgia Tech master's, Oklahoma State doctorate, all in economics. So, Mark, come on up. Thank you.
Guilty. Yep. Well, I've always heard the joke was that an economist is someone who's good with numbers but doesn't have enough personality to be an accountant. I heard it that way. That's the version I've heard. All right. Well, I usually turn most of these down. I don't really have the time to do a lot of outside presentations, but actually Chris sent me an email 10 years ago in December of 2014, said, "Hey, Mark, you want to come talk to our group?" And I did, and there's a few reasons why. One is this is always maybe one of the smartest groups I ever get invited to talk to. I don't know what it is about Rotary, but it just attracts optimistic, just smart people, just fun people. And
we got a Lions Club.
Yeah, well, I said one of. I said one of. Yeah, the Lions Club I've never been invited to, so I have no authority to speak on the Lions Club. Yeah, I've never been invited. And I don't speak to attorneys. I'm sorry if any of you are attorneys. I don't speak to groups of attorneys or pavement contractors, or I get asked to do all sorts of groups, and a lot of them I just don't do it. So glad to be here. Thanks for the invitation. It's been 10 years. Took you long enough to ask me back, but he didn't say I have deep OSU roots. I worked at OSU for 10 years. I'm an OSU grad. My wife, we're an OSU household. I have a senior in high school that thinks she wants to be an OSU, student one day. So I have pretty deep roots here, and good to be back. And we'll have a little bit of fun today. I'm going to ask you this before I get started. Is there one or two questions that you guys are talking about that I just need to know about before I start so I don't overlook it? Just shout it out if there's something you just are like, talk about this or go home. What is it that you want to hear about? Because I'll tell you, the topic at the top of my page is the top 15 questions I'm asked about the U.S. state and Stillwater economies. I'm going to go through what I'm already asked, so I can just answer it, and you won't have to ask me any more questions. But crypto is fascinating. I don't have an answer to your exact question, but crypto is just flat fascinating from my point of view, and maybe we'll weave in a little bit of why it matters for us. Anything else? Anything you're just dying to hear about that you just got to know? Okay, you're flexible then. All right, interest rates. That's the question. We're going to start out with, you ready for this? All right, here, there's going to be an exam afterwards. Old habits are hard to break. This is question number one. What is the current state of the U.S. economy? And I have to remind you before I answer this question, I am not political in any sense. Our business is built on giving non-political answers to economic questions. When you come to us for problems, you are looking for an unvarnished answer. So I will give you unvarnished answers to this, which means I'm going to offend most of you at some point along the way, because your politics may not agree with the economics. That's okay, but just realize that my politics usually come through pretty clearly what they are, but I'm just telling you, I'm giving you a pure, unvarnished, based on the data and the numbers answer. And you may disagree with it. So here we go. What is the current state of the U.S. economy? It is really quite hot. It is just, there is so much momentum in the U.S. economy, it is just downright scary. I have to tell you this, back a year and a half ago, after the Fed had already started raising interest rates, it became so fashionable for everyone to suggest that Fed's raising rates, we're above 5%, the economy is going to tank, recession is around the corner. The momentum alone has completely ruled out the possibility of a recession in the near term. Literally, it's just impossible. Especially 18 months ago, this notion that we were on the verge of, it's just literally impossible. We have opened the gates to immigration. New labor is coming into the country at an unbelievably rapid pace. There's still, I'll ask this question, how many of you still have an inflated bank account from 2020, 2021 stimulus? How many of you have more cash in the bank now than you did in 2020? I know all of you should be raising your hands, because I can see data on bank deposits in every city in America. Everybody is sitting on a pile of cash. The business community is, the household sector is. Too much stimulus, too much momentum in the economy, too much labor coming into the U.S. It was impossible a year and a half ago. Right now, though, I'm telling you, things are still extremely strong, but this is the first time in this cycle that we are actually looking at this as maybe we're within 12 months of this being a slight possibility. It could happen over the next 12 months, but there's just still tremendous momentum. So that's question one. To answer the key, 1,000-pound elephant in the room question, it's really strong. Oklahoma's strong. Almost every state is strong. It's like just a tidal force coming at the beach. It won't stop. All right, number two, has the progress on inflation stalled? This is the topic du jour right now. The past 3 CPI measures have been a little soft and hasn't continued on a perfectly straight, linear, downward path. Let me tell you, inflation never moves in a perfectly linear upward or downward path. It's full of noise, from the data series itself to just inflation itself. It's full of noise. We don't view there to be really any downward stickiness visible yet in the inflation numbers. There are 5 or 6 measures that really matter. All of them still remain in a perfectly nice, what we would call a well-behaving downtrend. Inflation is still falling. It's just taking a little longer than it appeared it was a year ago as inflation topped and started falling. And that's why the Fed chairman doesn't look visibly upset. He's just watching the data. So number 2, has the progress stalled? We don't see any evidence whatsoever that inflation has stalled, just a little noise in the last quarter of data. All right. How many of you are kind of going, wow? I mean, if I hear this one more time that inflation has stalled, everything I look at, that's all I hear is inflation has stalled. So I was waiting for some groans on that one. Yeah, some back, yeah, so I'll probably, you'll question me a little bit. All right, number 3 is the Fed making smart policy moves. You really don't want to praise the Fed too much. You really don't want the institutional press or the research community. You don't really want them puffing up the Fed. But I will tell you, the Fed has really made what I consider to be some pretty savvy moves in this cycle. I think they've handled it really, really well until about 6 months ago when the Fed chair made it perfectly clear that he thought the inflation trend was very positive and we've got rates where we want them, and so we're just going to hold out a little bit here. And he left his teacher voice and went to his I see you out there financial markets voice. And that's what bit him a little bit. Interest rates started falling sharply. And then we had this noisy quarter of inflation, and the financial markets are panicking again. So I think the Fed's doing a masterful job at this point. I hate to say that. I worked for the Fed for a while. I understand the internal negotiations and discussions and what they're going through at this particular moment. But I think they've done a masterful job. There's always a chance to criticize the Fed, but in this case, I think they've They've done well. All right, 4, are we headed for recession or stagnation? I've kind of answered that question for you. You know, is stagflation right around the corner? Weak economic conditions, you know, high inflation. I don't see even more than just a slight possibility of recession in 6 to 9 months. It would be almost impossible. The Fed would have to engineer it, or some other external event. You know, Putin's going to have to invade Europe. Something nutty is going to have to happen. Go say it again. Go ahead. Yeah, I like comments, so fire away. Yeah, well, you know, literally though, that's what it would take, you know, for something like this to happen. It's not baked into the system. We're not just sitting on the edge of something, you know, looking over and about to fall off. The momentum is just incredible. So no, I don't see that happening. But question 5 is, how likely is a Fed policy mistake? And let me tell you, the Federal Reserve has a long, long, long distinguished history of making policy mistakes. A long and distinguished history. I know I look like I'm 32, but I graduated high school in 1982 and went to the University of Georgia. You know, you called me out on that earlier. As a freshman, I took macroeconomics. You know, and I think this is part of what interested me and why I went into the economics profession. It was really, really a tough time. My dad was self-employed, and I remember the struggles and the issues in 81 and 82. And that is what I consider to be the classic Fed policy mistake. And everyone is really comparing this cycle to 81 and 82, where if the Fed just doesn't stay vigilant, you know, we're liable to go right back to 1982. Well, let me tell you, the difference between 2024 and 1982 could not be more stark. I mean, this is nothing. This is nothing like 1981 and 82. This is a baby version of that. So I'm not worried about the Fed. If the Fed takes a little bit of a soft tone on inflation, we're talking about 3 versus 2% inflation. These are wildly different environments. So I don't think a Fed policy mistake is likely, but let me tell you, again, the Fed has a long, 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 long distinguished history of making major policy mistakes. So, okay. I may have to speed up here. Number 6, how is Oklahoma doing relative to the nation? A couple of things. First, the initial downturn after the pandemic was a lot softer in Oklahoma than the nation. In fact, the national downturn wasn't quite twice as large, you know, measured by income drop or employment drop or, you know, any of the traditional measures, but it was close to being twice as large at the national level. Well, what happens, and this is a kind of a baked-in phenomenon in most economic data, bigger the downturn, bigger the bounce. It's built into any rubber ball too. Same principle works in physics and in economics. And so the U.S. immediate rebound was a lot larger than the rebound in Oklahoma. And the consequence was we did not have the same growth rates for really the first half of the recovery following COVID, for the sole reason that we didn't have the big, big aggressive downturn right at the leading edge of it. So there's always been this, you know, you can easily say, you know, Oklahoma took it worse, or Oklahoma, you know, has done a lot better than the U.S. You know, pick your interpretation of the data. But the reality is smaller downturn, smaller bounce. And then we started coming back to trend. And I'll tell you, in most of 2022, late 22 and the first half of 23, Oklahoma trailed the nation in just about every measure. We were not looking particularly good. Slight discount to the U.S. on almost every measure. The difference really was oil and gas. The state's oil and gas sector is a bit on life support. That's a coming question here, but it really was a bit of a drag. There are always certain, you know, differences between the nation and the state, just random differences. But nevertheless, you would say the state underperformed until about mid-23. And let me tell you, the state has really started humming in the last 12 months. Really, really humming. I mean, we are seeing some really visible signs of acceleration in the state economy. So how's it doing? A little slow to start, gain momentum, and now that you would say, I think you can argue on almost any measure the state's outperforming the nation, and the gap is probably widening. All right. Well, not at all. Who asked that question? Which is the most impressive thing of all? Because if the oil and gas industry kicks in, you're really going to see some serious acceleration. So what you're seeing is, core growth outperforming the nation without our, key short-run driver that has the ability to prop up growth rates. It's really fascinating to see. All right, number 7, how's the oil and gas sector doing? Did I just answer that already? Okay, all right. Number 8, we're getting to the tricky stuff here now. How does metro performance differ from the non-metro areas, or city versus rural? And throughout almost the entire post-pandemic period, metro has been outperforming rural. That, again, is largely, in my view, oil and gas. You see yards full of oil and gas equipment. The drilling, the profile of drilling in Oklahoma has gotten so concentrated and so narrow that any fringe areas that were doing development were killed. In fact, one of the things I'll get to if we have time is what happened in Stillwater, what happened to your oil and gas industry that popped up about 10 years ago. It looked like it was going to be a major driver of your sector. It almost disappeared the past 3 years. Literally, it's almost gone to zero. It's amazing. You went from a really fairly sizable and important and contributing to overall economic growth here locally to almost zero the past. Actually, I guess at this point we're talking about four plus years, but really a stark turnaround. Okay, Oklahoma City versus Tulsa, who is winning? Everybody's always interested in this battle. Oklahoma City is just the conditions there are just, they're gelling. I don't think there's any doubt about it. If you spend any time in Oklahoma City, it is my hometown, Atlanta, Georgia, 1970. 50 years from now, I can't wait to see what Oklahoma City looks like. It's the exact same structure, layout, culture, transportation, it's on so many dimensions. It's Atlanta 1970. Tulsa, on the other hand, is a little smaller, 15 to 20 years behind in development and size, but it is now becoming what Oklahoma City was 15 or 20 years ago. And so ask me again in 20 years to come again to talk to the group. And I'll probably have the same exact things to say about Tulsa. I'll be telling you about how it's gelling and how, population growth's gotten to such a critical level that it's just, then the interaction between Oklahoma City and Tulsa is so important, and all these things that are driving Tulsa, and you're gonna hear the same story from me. All right, number 10. Where is the new Oklahoma population coming from? Actually, the real question I get is, are all these people really coming to Oklahoma? Or some people ask me, why are all these people coming to Oklahoma? And let me just clarify, I'll sort of throw my cards out on the table. I've been here since 1990. I arrived in 1990. The state had a real confidence problem. All of you, if you've been around that long, you know in 1990, we were throwing around things like we're a poor state, we got to overcome the oil bust, just the whole makeup of the state was shaken to the core. From 81, 82, all the way to the 90s when housing prices finally bottomed and started rising again, 15 years later. It really shook the state. But I find Oklahoma to be a really nice place to live. And I have loved Oklahoma City. I've lived in Stillwater and Oklahoma City. I love both places. I love Tulsa. Tulsa's a cool town. And so when I hear these words, I just kind of shake my head and I say, why, I don't even really want to engage you in that conversation about why they're coming to Oklahoma. It's a great state. And so they're coming here in mass, and most of them are coming from the western half of the U.S. or Texas. That's where 2/3 of them are coming from. The other third is the entire country. And the point is the pipelines have improved toward Oklahoma from almost every single market. We're bringing net people in from Texas. We're bringing net people in from California. Bringing net people in from just about every western state. And most of the states on the East Coast where we're slightly losing people, the losses are way smaller than they were in the prior decade. So everything about people coming to Oklahoma has improved. And that's where they're coming from. The real question we need to understand better is where they're living. That takes time for the data to roll through, because that I can't give you an answer to. Because local population estimates, emphasis on estimates, are really bad in the short term, and it takes years to get good population estimates. So that question I can't answer for you. Number 11, are there any state budget issues? Man, if you've looked at budgets around the state level, down to municipalities and counties, oh my goodness, the money flowing into government coffers is just, I mean, it's like a one-time upward shift to everything. And here's the trick. Now we are flattening out. Everybody's budget is flat or slightly down, maybe slightly up, but way higher than it used to be. And it's that whole question of, can you maintain these one-time jumps in budgets and keep them going? You know, what's the line look like going forward? Well, I'll tell you what the line usually looks like going forward. It goes sideways for a long time until you can afford once again to enter an uptrend. We're seeing it at the state level. You know, budgets at the state level are going to be roughly flat to tiny single-digit gains this year and probably next year. Part of it is inflation coming out of the system. The other part is you spending less. The third is just returning back to trend growth. And this is happening in almost every city. In fact, of the 30 largest cities in 2023, the state added about 2.5% in sales tax revenue. About a third of the cities were 2.5% or lower, and about 20% of the cities had negative sales and use tax growth for 2023. If you looked at it the prior year, every single one of them were positive, and the weakest city had about a 5% growth rate. Strongest were in the 15 to 20%. So we've shifted from gigantic growth rates to flat, slightly rising or negative. All right, you ready for 12, 13, 14, and 15? Okay, because the question 12 is, how is Stillwater performing relative to the state? Yeah, ain't that the question of the year? Well, I'll give you a two-word answer to start with. Just okay. Just okay. It's doing just okay. You know, Stillwater's been under a tremendous amount of pressure, and I'm gonna throw question 13 in. Which sectors underlie any weakness? And Stillwater's been under pressure. You know, when you lose major employers, critical, you know, tentacles sunk deep in the community, and Stillwater suffered some of these. And then when you have your beautiful, you know, homegrown oil and gas industry basically shrink to zero, all the weaknesses in the good sectors. It's manufacturing, it's energy, and it's in the wholesale trade market that always gets wiped out when manufacturing and energy are weak. Wholesale trade moves exactly with those industries over time. And so you've got a goods sector problem. Your services sector looks kind of state-like. The goods side, though, has transformed the totals to look kind of slightly below average. So when I say just okay, it's a goods sector problem, not a service sector problem. Service sectors look pretty good. You're seeing hiring. The health sector looks good. Your government sector is growing slightly, not getting out of control. Retail sales are underperforming in Stillwater. You know, you've seen about 2% retail sales growth over the past year relative to about 2.5% at the state level. So you've been slightly underperforming the state for really the past 3 years, but still it's just okay. It's just okay. You know, you're kind of middle of the package to slightly below middle of the pack. And those are the sectors. And you know where the weakness is coming from. You know, always the question is, what do you do about it? Well, in 20 years when I come back, I'll answer that question. And 14 is Stillwater population and housing growing like the state? Anybody want to take a shot at that?
Housing's growing.
Yeah, what kind of housing? Let's be more specific. Yeah, a little pricier, but single family. How much multifamily construction has there been in Stillwater in the past 3 years? Yeah, there's a little bit going on right now, but compared to the prior 5 years, say take the 3 years, prior 5 years, it's basically zero compared to what you were accustomed to. And now this, you know, the multifamily side is retrenched. You built plenty, you built a lot of capacity, and your single family market is doing okay. You're adding, 15 houses a month, maybe 150, 170 houses per year. That is what you call very modest and moderate population growth. So in answering the other half of that question, population and housing, they rarely get out of whack. They move with each other jointly over time. Well, Payne County, yeah, we'll abstract away from the city limits here, which is an excellent question. Yeah, Payne County, and so they will never deviate far from each other. So the point is you're experiencing moderate population growth. You got steady housing. That's the point, is it's steady. I'll use the steady word. You got steady housing on the single family side, very little on the multifamily side after, years of consistent growth. And so what I would suggest to you is that the labor force, the housing market, and your population numbers all look alike. They're just okay. That's the conclusion. We could dive way deeper into each component and come up with better answers, but I'll leave it with that. 15, are there any key risk factors or challenges for Stillwater? I spent a lot of time in Stillwater. I have over the years. We look at every county in the state. We study them. We do forecasting for all 77 counties. We look at them intently. And, Stillwater has struggled since you started losing major employers, when the manufacturing side started to shrink, at this point more than a decade ago. And you've had just, pressure against the city's growth path the entire time. And I would suggest to you there are just a lot of risk factors Stillwater and Payne County is facing. And so I want to find myself to just stop and go, well, remember the good things before how you're supposed to tell your children, sweetie, I love you. You're just the most talented child in the world, and I appreciate everything you do to behave and to follow my instructions. But, so pretend I first built you up and reminded you about how great a town Stillwater is and how great a state Oklahoma is. I've already told you that, right? Okay, so before I do that, I just want to make sure it's clear that I'm not trying to beat up on Stillwater. I just try to tell you clearly what we see as some of the risk factors. And the turmoil in higher ed is a serious risk factor. And I don't necessarily mean divisive political battles. I just mean the questioning of the entire business model of higher ed and how it's going to work over the next 30 years. There's a big risk factor for Stillwater. I drove in today and there were no students on campus. I have lots of friends who work in the buildings over here, and they tell me there are never any students on campus anymore. I mean, that it's just, it is this the mix between distance education, online education, shifts in the amount of hours, spent on campus, just the shift. Every time you come to campus, you see nothing like the body of people that used to be here when many of you and I were on a campus. It's a completely different world. You can actually park now. And so what I'm suggesting to you is that this is a real risk factor for Stillwater. It's a risk factor for tourism, dollars, or spending, if you count student spending and family spending. It's just I don't have a crystal ball for you. I just have a clear sign that higher ed turmoil is it's going to be a risk factor for you. It's not going away, it's going to intensify. 2 is the Oklahoma City and Tulsa strength. It may be your biggest problem, the fact that Oklahoma City and Tulsa are so attractive to firms and households outside of the state that when they're coming to Oklahoma, all they hear about is Tulsa and Oklahoma City, and your story is going to have to be sold against 2 really good stories. Hope I'm not out of time yet. I almost am. Competing manufacturing towns, Stillwater has wrestled with this manufacturing demise. And there are other cities around the state who are way, way, way more invested in attracting new manufacturing than Stillwater is. It's just it's just the way it is. And so what has proven to be one of your weaknesses is where the competition is maybe outpacing you a bit. It's going to continue to be a risk. The local oil and gas sector, unless you have very high oil and gas prices, your local oil and gas sector is not going to come back. It's just not competitive in the current world of geology and production and international energy dynamics. So if you get $100 oil, $90 oil, if you get $5 natural gas, you're going to see your industry, show short run blossoming. But at long run, it's not going to happen. And the other is just the pull of the metro areas of your existing base. without having that mass. The reality is that small regions with amenities can do well, and Stillwater is one of those. You have a research university in your backyard. You can do well. The problem is that it may be that the lack of mass and the isolated position of the city, is offsetting, a lot of the advantages of it. So, again, I'm not trying to point out the issues, but I want to point out the issues for you as we see them, so that at least, we're all talking about them. I think in many cities they're reluctant to talk about some of these things because we don't want to talk about the problems, but there's only one way to solve a problem, and that's to talk about it. And so I want Stillwater to be more than just okay. And Stillwater's had some friction the past decade in terms of labor force growth, population growth, and I think the potential here is just astoundingly good. So I ended on a bad note, didn't I? You aren't supposed to do that. A down note. So let me just shift, and I'll tell you to think a happy thought. And I think I don't know if you have a minute or two for questions, but I'll be happy to answer any afterwards if you do. I wish I could have gotten through that faster. But I think I've blown up my time. Go right ahead.
I have a question. In the lead up to this campaign, there are a million polls for everything, and people keep saying they're unhappy about the economy.
Which campaign? We talking presidential?
The presidential campaign.
Okay.
They're being polled, and okay. I hear reporters keep saying, everybody in the United States is unhappy about the economy. They feel like they're not as well off today as they were 4 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah?
You're not going to like this. The best advice I have for you is to quit listening to what the American people
I'm happy to
tell
do
you.
that.
What they tell you. They lie.
I'm happy to do that.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Good, I feel good about it.
That really is one of the most interesting dilemmas in economics. Can you believe, the sort of feedback from the business community or from the housing, the just households in general? Can you believe that feedback? And I will tell you this, I 100% believe you ignore the conversation and you start with the data. There are three ways to know what's going on in an economy. You look at the data, you ask the people, and then you get in the car and drive around. And I suggest you do them in that order. Start with the data, then ask people what they think, and then get in the car and go drive around. And that is how you get a good feel for what's really happening in America. And the reality is that things are just sort of smoking hot. And people are grumbly about politics, but about economics, man, it's just, the momentum is incredible.
The higher education issue in OSU, basically over the last several years have had record or near record enrollments. And so are you suggesting that's not a lot of necessarily on-campus students here?
Well, you didn't mention UCO or every other university. OU and OSU have maintained enrollment numbers. They slight upward trend. Looks great. But the moment you dip below and you get to UCO, it's sort of the next university, and then below, oh my goodness, UCO's, wow. Go look at their numbers, make your own decision. I'm not going to tell you how dire the situation is, but it's just where will these students be? Will they all go to comprehensive, research institutions? Is that will we shut down a lot of these regional universities? Will all these small private colleges, begin to fall in larger and larger and larger numbers? I don't really know. As I said, my crystal ball hasn't given me an answer to this question, but I do know that when you don't have live bodies in a classroom, that's called sunk cost, sunk assets. And, it's quite feasible that the city of Stillwater could end up with this massive complex with nobody in it. We've got a Ponca City man right here. Anybody ever seen the Conoco complex in Ponca City? Should I start around the state? Phillips, and let's go outside Oklahoma and start talking about some of these. They're sunk costs. They're just brick and mortar, and so it's going to take some conscious planning to find the direction and maybe shape it more so than just understand where it's going. It's more of shaping it. So I wish I had a better answer for you, but yes, the turmoil, the volatility, the uncertainty is a big risk factor. Yes. Over here. Yes, ma'am.
I lived in the DFW area, the Metroplex. There are several people in here.
Yes.
My friend Ivan comes to mind.
Yeah.
Connie in the Northeast Texas.
Yep.
Have you all been down there lately to DFW in the last year,
Yeah.
5 years? I lived down there over 20 years. Frankly, I had to escape, my wife and I, to get out of there. I don't want growth like that up here. It'll never come, but it's crazy. The traffic,
Don't be so sure.
the cranes, I mean, maybe Oklahoma City, but anyway,
Yeah.
we love it up here. We love Stillwater. We don't want that kind of growth.
Yeah.
So
I'm with you. I'm with you. I try
Yeah.
to avoid Dallas in general.
Yeah, it's nuts. So anyway,
Let me remind you, though, as a kid,
Uh-huh.
I saw the population sign on Peachtree Street in Atlanta flip
Yeah.
from 1,999,999 to 2 million, which isn't a whole lot larger than Oklahoma City. Your children, grandchildren
Yeah.
are likely going to see an Oklahoma City that's 3 or 4 million people.
in what, 10 years?
Well, 30 or 40 or
20, okay.
50, you know. Yeah.
And on the one
I don't want
last
to date myself, but yeah.
one last point
Yes.
that hits home with me a little bit. My son
Yeah.
is a full-time college student, 100% online. He lives in Allen, Texas.
There you go. Yeah.
His school is based in Orlando.
Risk factor, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
it's
anyway,
just-
well, thank you, sir.
Yeah. I'm sorry if I went too long. I appreciate it.
No,
Yeah, thank you.